Oh, never change, live chat. Never, ever, ever change. Welcome inside the collective. It is January 13th. I am Bobby Trost.
Okay, wait, hold on, Bobby. Do you have to pee? Do we need to pause for a pee break? You good to go?
Yeah. The context needed there was a week ago when we thought that was going to be our wildest Tuesday ever. Here we are with a state of the Ravens to get through, which went 60 plus minutes. Jeff, of course, one of the many media members that took part in today's press conference. Steve Bisciotti's first in that kind of on-camera setting since 2018. And yes, the inside jokes in the live chat have to do with my bowel movement a week ago. That's neither here nor there. We appreciate you guys for being with us tonight. It's brought to you by our friends at Sleeper, Jeff of The Athletic, Cole of Road Graders. Thanks for being with us, guys. If you could on the way in, like the video, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Consider becoming a channel member. You see the menu of items that we have to get to on the left-hand side. Takeaways from today. The urgency, clearly, that's there among all parties is Lamar. We'll see about that in terms of his extension. The latest on the Ravens head coach search, which, Jeff, 15, 16 candidates deep so far. EDC said 16. We'll get into that. Get your thoughts on that. And, of course, the Eric DeCosta self-assessment and overall evaluation moving forward as they get ready for their fourth head coach in franchise history. Jeff, I mean, you got to take it away from here, man. This is something that obviously as a media member, you don't get to do all the time, since Steve made a conscious decision years ago after the 2018 season to kind of take a back seat and allow his leadership council, if you will, to do a lot of the media obligations and be the mouthpiece and mouthpieces for the organization. What were your main takeaways having sat there today for, again, over an hour listening to DeCosta and Bisciotti field questions?
Yeah, I'll tell you, there's so much to talk about. I'll try to kind of give the Cliff Notes version. One, moving forward, this organization is all about Lamar Jackson and improving everything around him, his situation. They couldn't have been more clear. I think it was refreshing to hear Bisciotti's candor. Some of the frustrating, aspect of this whole Lamar Jackson Ravens thing is that they've walked on eggshells kind of around him and the topic of his contract and his injuries and all that. There was no walking on eggshells today by Steve Bisciotti. He put it right out there. He's our quarterback. We need to re-sign him to an extension. We've told him that. We need to get this done as soon as possible. He said he invited Lamar to the coaches meeting, the coaching meeting, and said, look, we want him part of this. My plane's ready if we want to take it to come to, up to Maryland next week. And he's going to be a big part of this. And I love that. I think that was a really important first step this offseason in moving forward and silencing some of the noise, fair or unfair, about the whole situation. Two, it's very clear that it was Steve Bisciotti's decision to fire John Harbaugh. He had lost confidence in the direction of the team. He had tired of some of the trends, the playoff failures, the blowing big leads, the regression on both of the ball that were going on in Harbaugh and with Harbaugh's team. And he felt like he needed to move forward. And three, he does not blame this on Eric DeCosta. Obviously, everyone has accountability in this, but he clearly thinks they had a much better roster this year than they played like it. And his harshest critique was probably on the coaching staff, Harbaugh included. So those were my three big takeaways. We could talk about them more going forward. I'm sure we will. And the fact of the matter is, I think Steve said what needed to be said today to move this organization forward. There's going to be a head coaching hire probably within 10 days to 2 weeks. And then all focus will be on getting this Lamar Jackson contract done so they could really move forward this offseason and focusing on improving their roster. So today was kind of one of those, I think there was one of these things they had to get through today. Talk about the decision, talk about their plans, and then just go forward. So they'll have a new coach, I would think, pretty soon, and then we can get to the rest of the business of building the roster this offseason.
Yeah, Jeff, great overview. And I think from, I'll just kind of give the fan perspective because, I don't want to speak for all Ravens fans, but kind of the majority that kind of spoken with, seen on Twitter, kind of reacting, it was just very energizing. It was one of those things where we've been complaining for years about kind of some of the coach speak and some of the like half answers and some of the answers that we just weren't happy with. And, I felt like Steve Bisciotti sat up there and was just a straight shooter. He didn't beat around the bush. He kind of set priorities with some pretty strict timelines. And I think it just really kind of made what the future direction of this team is being very clear. And Jeff just kind of summed it up, hire a head coach, get the Lamar deal done before free agency. And Eric, I wouldn't say Eric committed. Committed is kind of a silly word because we don't know how it's going to go. But Eric making a strong statement that he, they usually don't have this much cap space. And I was actually, Jeff and I were talking about this last week. Like they can create some more, an extension gets them in a good spot. Like we're not in this situation where they need to clear cap just to have that 10 million to go through the season. Like they can actually go sign someone. And we haven't seen that since the offseason when they signed Morgan Moses and they went for the Zadarius Smith contract that kind of backfired, and Marcus Williams, where they were kind of big. I'd say they were big spenders that year. They weren't worried about the comp picks and all that. So I feel like if they can get this Lamar deal done, that could be the potential we see is kind of 2 big signings or 1 big signing and 2 medium signings. So I just felt very energized. I felt like Bisciotti, it felt like he heard us. I know that, I think someone asked him about that and he was like, yeah, I kind of, don't really pay attention to it. I'm sure they see stuff. But I felt like there was just a lot of questions we had answered with straight answers, no beating around the bush. The reasons for the firing were very clear, and it was stuff that we've seen and we've talked about on the show all year. Like the blown leads kept happening. So I just felt great. I felt like Bisciotti answered a lot of questions, and I thought Eric, and maybe because he was sitting beside Steve, Eric gave some more direct answers than we've seen in some of his pressers. And I know some of those are around the draft where he's not going to give out information on targets and stuff. But overall, just really, really solid.
Jeff, right at the top of the conference, one of the first questions ultimately is, how did you, and both, all three of us have alluded to this already, but how did you ultimately land on this decision? Steve Bisciotti was asked his answer.
But you factually, we led the league in giving up big leads in the fourth quarter. It's not something that winning organizations do. We have underperformed based on our seeding in the playoffs. Very disappointing. A lot of players involved, a lot of our great players involved, making mistakes that they don't make during the regular season very often. But I just thought it was something that in the last 10 years, we've won the 3rd most games in the NFL, and yet people were saying we were underachievers. And so we were, and we had to own that. And I really can't tell you the actual time, Jameson, but sometime last week. I wasn't 100% sure until really after the loss. And,
one of the more long-winded answers. I think we get the point, right? The point is that some of the areas of shortcomings that Cole noted a couple minutes ago were just point blank addressed. And you see it here, right? And you just heard it. Quote, we led the league in giving up big leads in the fourth quarter. It's not something that winning organizations do. Jeff, we've not had a chance to catch up with you since your piece over the weekend in conjunction with Diana Rossini, your athletic counterpart. And you guys had quite a bit discovered in terms of the 36 hours within this whole decision-making process. And now ultimately that leaves the Ravens as one of the most coveted jobs in the entire league.
Yeah, I think what is interesting with what Steve Bisciotti said about the timing was he acknowledged he started talking to Eric DeCosta about it 4 or 5 weeks ago. So it's not something that was impulsive. If there was any thought about Tyler Loop's missed field goal and have that had a bearing on whether John Harbaugh would still be their head coach, Steve said unequivocally no. It would have bought John Harbaugh another week, which was a pretty terse, probably shortest answer all day, but it certainly sent a clear message. Look, we all knew that John, with all the smoke and nobody from the team really came forward to dispute it late in the season, we all knew that there were some serious conversations going on about his future and his status. We also know enough to know this organization is not going to make a decision on an 18-year employee, their winningest coach they've ever had, based on one game. So I thought it was pretty interesting, the timing Steve broke down, in terms of when he started to think. And, I don't think he pushed it that much today, because I don't think they want to send the message that the players were driving this decision. Steve made it clear it was him. He also made it clear that he had talked to a bunch of players too. So, I think there were people pushing for Harbaugh to stay in the front office. They wanted to give him another chance. I think there were some people that felt like this was a little drastic. But clearly, Steve was leaning towards that direction. And then his conversations with players Monday night into Tuesday, pushed him over the edge, or at least confirmed what he suspected. And I think it is kind of interesting if you go back to 2008, and I wasn't covering the team then, but everything I read about it going back was how instrumental player feedback was in Brian Billick's firing. And, I don't know that it was the big thing here, but you can't argue with the timing. Like, if Steve was sure of himself, he would have fired John Harbaugh Monday morning. There's obviously, he still had to have some more discussions. He met with the Ravens' other decision makers, Eric DeCosta, Ozzie Newsome, Sashi Brown, on Monday. They went over his house to talk about the decision. Those three men met with John Harbaugh in the morning to kind of get his plan going forward. And they all got back in the building. Steve Bisciotti, meanwhile, worked the phones and talked to players. And that process started Monday night and continued through Tuesday. And then Tuesday afternoon, he had his decision. But Steve made clear, this decision is on me. It was not the other guys. And it, he wanted everybody to know that the players didn't push me to this. This was something that I did my homework on, and I believe I won't regret. So he was pretty strong in his explanation, and I think that'll put to bed a lot of the conspiracy theories.
And Cole, now the search begins. Steve Bisciotti talked about the criteria moving forward. It's been a long time since this organization was in the position that it now is. 15, 16 candidates. Who knows, Jeff? Maybe that number gets up close to 20 when it's all said and done. Here is Steve, one of the many answers, I should say questions, that he fielded earlier this afternoon related to the search that's now, close to a week old?
About a week old,
Kind of interesting, because when we started focusing on this, the very first thing that I said to Eric and Sash was, unlike 18 years ago, I am very intrigued by coaches that were the hottest offensive and defensive coordinators 5, 6, 7 years ago in their cycles, and got jobs and went to teams that were non-competitive and didn't have a quarterback. And they grind for 3 or 4 years, and they're caught up in the cycle of many of my partners that are turning these. I think it's average 4 years career, right? I think the head coach is about 4 years. As we proved, I think we've got a quarter out now, right? 8, 9. So, the one thing that I know that I will probably take it on the chin is if our final candidate is an ex-coach who has a losing record, and you all are going to have to understand that we are going to be able to judge that failure with his circumstances and marry that up and not disqualify them. So it's interesting you said, is there anything that's disqualifying? Where we are, I could say I'm disqualifying coaches with losing records, but I think you have to remember that they were the hottest coaches in their cycle, and they got jobs, and they got tough jobs. And I don't think we have a tough job. I think that we got to the, we created the best opening in this cycle. And so that was the one category that I didn't want to ignore, because the first thing you all are going to say is, my God, he went 38 and 48 in his last job and they're hiring him. When Tony Dungy said, this is a bad decision and good luck finding someone better than John, I literally wanted to call Tony and say, you remember John 18 years ago? How can you take our success and use it against me while we're out trying to find the next John Harbaugh?
Fellas, I know that's one of the longer ones, but maybe one of the most fascinating parts of the entire press conference. I'm sure you both are going to want to get in on this one. So just for time purposes, I have it all transcribed here. First of all, an unprompted response to Tony, right, Jeff? That's a part of it. He is acutely aware. He may not be visible these days in terms of to the public eye, but that does not make him unaware of what's being said about him and his franchise. But Cole, why don't you get in here first? Because the door, and while maybe this is smoking strategic when it comes to being tight-lipped and, we can't be naive and be prisoners of the moment too much, but perhaps this leaves the door wide open for potential retreads that are among the candidates, Kingsbury's, Joseph's, McDaniels, King, you name it. There's a bunch of them. What were your thoughts on those comments?
Yeah, the first guy I thought of when he was talking, and I've seen a lot of people say they thought of Brian Flores, and I completely get it. I thought of Robert Saleh and his time in New York, where I thought he put together a really good coaching staff. I thought they had a really good defense, but they had Zach Wilson. And the thing is, Zach and Wilson was going 3 and out every 45 seconds and getting that defense out there. And that defense was still finishing top 10 with the combination of Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich, who just finished in under Raheem Morris in Atlanta. So that's kind of where my head went. But yeah, no, they've made it no secret when you look at who they're looking at. Everybody, they're looking at new bloods. They're looking at guys like Davis Webb and I'm going to butcher the name, but Nathan Skeelhaas out of McVay's system with the Rams as pass game coordinator. So they're going with guys that have 2-3 years experience and guys that have been doing this, for 2 decades, 3 decades. So I really like their approach. I mean, we talked about it last week. They're going to go high and low, touch on everybody. But the guy that really, just kind of crossed my mind based on who I've been interested in, and we're going to get into this a little bit later, but I just thought of Robert Saleh because I think you look at what he's doing for the 49ers right now with a very depleted defense, and he still got them out there winning playoff games. I know obviously their offense put up points, but that defense played really well too. And so his time with the Jets, and again, you can group Flores into that as well. You can put Vance Joseph in there as well. When I looked at the quarterbacks that Vance Joseph had, and he had to deal with Trevor Siemian, Brock Osweiler, Paxton Lynch, and Case Keenum. I'm not sure. And that was kind of, I saw once Tomlin got fired, they were kind of comparing, is Pittsburgh's job better than Baltimore? And I thought he kind of nailed it at the start of that quote. The thing Baltimore has over every other team looking for a head coach right now is not just a starting caliber quarterback, but a top 5 quarterback, a top 3 quarterback in Lamar Jackson. And so this is going to be the top job on the market. They're going to have their pick of the litter, and they'll explore every option as we're seeing. I think they're doing this process absolutely the way they should be doing it.
Jeff, how did you gauge Steve's comments in terms of maybe throwing out some feelers out there, whether it's smoke related or not, in terms of their candidacy and the disqualifying question by Jonas?
Yeah, I mean, you look at it and how many coaches that they've interviewed or they're going to interview qualified in terms of what he said. I mean, you got Vance Joseph, Kevin Stefanski, Matt Nagy, Cliff Kingsbury, Brian Flores, Robert Saleh, Mike McDaniel, Jim Schwartz. So that's pretty much most of their list, is guys. So I think he understands. I'm not assuming one of those guys is going to get the job. But they have a very good infrastructure in place. They have a 2-time MVP quarterback. So, look, you can criticize some of these coaches because their tenure didn't go as well, but you also need to look at their situations individually. How is the rest of the organization? How is the roster? How is the ownership? Did they have a quarterback? So all that goes into it. I think it's been a really interesting list, guys. And I was talking to somebody this weekend who's sort of involved, not for them, but another team. And he made the point, like, look, they have such an advantage right now, them being the Ravens. And his point was 3 or 4 teams are completely waiting on an answer from John Harbaugh. Like, if John Harbaugh wants the Giants job, he's the new head coach of the New York Giants. If John Harbaugh wants the Atlanta Falcons job, he's almost surely the new head coach of the Falcons. And if he wants the Tennessee Titans job, he's going to be the coach there too. And John will be taking interviews later this week. The Ravens don't have to wait. You know, they can hone in on their candidates and run a wide search and not feel rushed. And at this time of year, you need to get this right. And if you have some time on your side and you can kind of wait out, because the interview rules get much stricter once the division playoffs were beyond that. Like, it's tougher to talk to guys. So that's why we're going to really see a push this week. They have 8 or 9 interviews scheduled this week that haven't been done, and they'll have to do those by Sunday. And, I think we'll see Jesse Minter as one of them, the Chargers DC. We'll see Robert Saleh, the 49ers DC. We'll see Nathan Shieldhouse, the Rams pass game coordinator. We'll see Mike McDaniel. We'll see Chris Shula, the Rams defensive coordinator. We'll see Joe Brady, the Bills offensive coordinator. We'll see Jim Schwartz, the former Browns coach. And it would not surprise me if there's 1 and 2 names. There's a mystery candidate in every list. And some of these names don't get out because the agents don't want it to get out, or the team doesn't want it to get out. And you take that list and you even multiply it by about 4, because they're calling a bunch of other coaches to get intel, and coaches are calling them because they're interested. So it's been a real wide net they've cast. Somebody mentioned the media room that them and the Steelers have the top job and was kind of comparing them. And I'm like, okay, I have a lot of respect for the Steelers organization and all that, but when you look at their quarterback situation and the age on their defense, they're going to have to overhaul their whole defense. I don't think you can really contest the fact that the Ravens have a top opening, and there's people licking their chops for a chance to coach Lamar Jackson, a 2-time MVP quarterback. So they're doing the right thing. I think also the aspect of this that we don't talk about much, the Ravens are always looking for more information. That's kind of a credo of this organization. If you're caught up in a decision, if you don't know the right answer, get more information, make more calls. So there's no doubt these are all legitimate coaching interviews, but don't think for a second they're not trying to get information out of some of these guys about how they see the Ravens, what their plans would be for Lamar Jackson, what their plans would be for fixing the defense. How did other teams prepare for the Ravens? And a lot of these situations are, these coaches want this job. I mean, this is a plum opening. So they're going to be open, and they're going to come up with an expansive plan and sell the heck out of themselves to try to get this job. And I'm sure the Ravens are taking notes. I'm sure they're learning more about their team. The most important quality about any organization is ability to self-evaluate and know who you are. And I think that's maybe gotten away from the Ravens a little bit. But when you're sitting here talking to all these candidates, hearing what they think of your players, what they think of your team, how are they prepare to play your team, that's extremely beneficial. So they'll come out of this process better for it just by doing all these interviews.
Yeah, ultimately it's a form of self-assessing, like you just said, and stockpiling as much information as you could possibly get as these guys come up with their best pitches. And they're 8 deep already, right? 8 completed interviews, 15
8 complete,
16.
yeah.
Yep. And this afternoon was the 8th. That's Brian Flores. So the rest are going to be, as Jeff noted, coming up here soon. Guys, the Lamar Jackson component, obviously something that we need to get to in terms of his role. Let's get a read in. Let's get some super chats in, and let's turn to Lamar, because there were several pieces and moments of the press conference that certainly deserve our attention when it comes to 8 and his future. But first,
Sleeper is the #1 fantasy sports app. It pays to know sports. Pick more or less on top players. Your first pick is on us, so start winning now. Play in Texas, Georgia, Minnesota, and 27 more states. Pick anytime across all sports, pregame or live. Over 10 million players are already on Sleeper. Make your picks count. Score up to 1,000 times your cash. Join today, get up to $100 credit using code HMA. Call your shot on Sleeper. Download now.
Well, all season long, we've been powered by Sleeper, and if you use promo code HMA, you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions, do apply. You can see Sleeper's terms of use for details. It's currently operational in over 25 states and counting. You can check out more at Sleeper today. All right, fellas, let's get to some super chats here before we transition to Lamar-related content. And Dylan got us started at the beginning of the show. And Dylan writes, and Jeff, for you, are we in active Lamar negotiations? If so, when does it get it done? Only a week into the season. Maybe you don't have the best feel for this. Obviously, they're going to be tight-lipped. We all know that from 2022, Jeff. But what's your feeling in terms of when this potentially gets started?
I mean, active negotiations. Look, Lamar doesn't have an agent, so you weren't going to do these negotiations in season. You know, like, you need your quarterback to be getting ready for the game, you know, getting right, all that. So they really haven't had much of a chance. They fired their coach 30 hours or 36 hours after the end of the season. So I think the most important thing, as I said earlier, we could go into more, was they have started the dialogue with Lamar Jackson. They've made sure Lamar Jackson knows how important it is to get this deal done by the second week of March when the market opens in free agency. They have put a time frame on it now, and they've told us exactly what they're going to do if they don't get a deal done. Steve said flat out, they're going to alter his contract and just add void years to spread out the cap for a couple 2 years. So there's two options here. You get an extension or you spread out that cap. And I think it was, I think he was pretty clear that Lamar Jackson isn't going anywhere, and their hope is to get this contract done. Now, Eric DaCosta is doing a lot right now, and he's heading this process for new coach. So to ask him to do that and negotiate the deals, Lamar, is a little much. But I think once this head coach gets hired, once they help him formulate his staff, that's when the Ravens will really push forward and try to knock out this deal with Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar clearly knows how they felt. I mean, I don't ever remember Steve Bisciotti saying he talked to Lamar Jackson in the past. We just got him saying twice. He said he talked to him last night. He talked to him last week. He's given him a spot in his plane. So, I think they made very clear how they feel about this and how their plans are to go through this shoulder to shoulder with Lamar and get this done for the betterment of the team.
In other words, there is a pretty strict timeline in a lot of ways, right? So should be really, really interesting to see how that plays out. Jabbo and Colin both noting some Cole Twitter activity earlier this evening. And that brings us to Sammy, who writes, when will we get clarity on Nnamdi's situation? I thought that EDC would provide some, but he really didn't. Any timeline for an update? Do you think he's going to retire, play next year, or just go on to IR? Jeff, before we get maybe the reporter side of your take, Cole, your thoughts on how, yet again, it wasn't John Harbaugh for the first time in a while that was asked, but it was essentially back to the square one in terms of not knowing.
Yeah, I mean, I think we mentioned this a few weeks ago. Like if they had positive news, there's been nothing preventing them from spreading some positive news over the last few weeks. I think if they had a positive update, I think they would have used this as an opportunity to get it out there. And they made it clear they're not going to release information about his medical status because they don't think it's appropriate. So, I mean, I don't really know what that means. I just don't think it's positive. So I'm bracing myself for the potential of an IR or some sort of cap relief release related to a medical retirement. Like, that's just the situation that, I think if you kind of read the tea leaves, I think that's what it's looking like.
Twats, Jeff, did you have anything to add on that? I mean, the optics aren't great. Obviously, we know that.
Yeah, I mean, look, Cole said it best. They'd be yelling from the rooftops if they had gotten positive news here. And I know it's frustrating to people, fans to not know, but they're doing absolutely the right thing here. This isn't their announcement to make if it's career ending. That's Nnamdi Madubuike's announcement to make. And when he comes to a decision, I'm sure he'll be the guy to announce it, or his agent will be the guy to announce it. So it's just that, I respect totally what the Ravens are doing here. You can't get ahead of that on a player like that. That's Nnamdi Madubuike's announcement to make. But I think we all know that we all really feel strongly about where this is headed. I mean, it's become abundantly clear over the last couple months where this is headed.
Thanks, Sammy. Twat Swat says, shout out Jay-Z with a bunch of flowers, giving you some bouquets, Jeff, on this Tuesday evening. And JS19 underscore your face. JS19 underscore Raven says, did EDC announce Fa'alele's $130 million
Look at Cole.
2-year extension?
Cole's just seething over there.
Listen, I've already had one battle tonight. Let's not make it two.
Hey, you're just gonna have. You know how much fun we're gonna have when John Harbaugh's team, wherever he ends up, signs him.
Greg Roman's gonna be running the plays. They're gonna have.
We're gonna have to do a special show to commemorate that moment.
Actually, you know what's funny, Jeff? On that note, all of the Chargers fans last night tweeting for Ben Cleveland to be put in the game. This guy is a fan favorite wherever he goes.
Hold on a second. Ben Cleveland, they elevated him for that game? Is he elevated for the practice squad?
I
don't even know. I just saw a lot of people saying we need to get Ben Cleveland in the game. And I was like, what the hell's going on?
I was wow. Man, that offensive line was something. You know?
That was bad.
Losing both of your tackles comes back to bite you eventually. Richard says Reeds and the Belichicks are seasoned and didn't find ultimate success until they had their second stint, full stamp of approval on the process, assuming that Steve was being sincere in terms of potential retread candidacy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You learn a lot. I mean, you absolutely learn a lot from failure. I'm guessing, there's a lot of things that coaches would do differently the second time around. They get more, they'll feel like they'll have more support here. Obviously better players. So you can't rule out anybody in this process. Like you need to do your diligence on each situation, get information, and that's what they're doing. So I applaud. Some people may take it, okay, they're hiring an ex-head coach and they want head coaching experience. I don't think that what he said means that, but I think obviously when probably around 2/3 of your interviews so far are former head coaches, you're going to probably want to get that out there if you wind up with one of those guys.
Can I clarify on that, Jeff? I want to make sure I understood the quote wrong, because I saw a lot of people saying this makes me think they're going to target Flores or Salah, like a guy that was a former head coach. Was he not just saying that he wouldn't disqualify people that had bad? Okay, so it wasn't that he's preferring someone with experience. He just Okay. So
he said like the question from Jonas Schaefer, the banner was,
right,
is there anything that would disqualify? And he basically, he answered it, and then he basically brought up the fact that no, like that's not something that would disqualify head coach. I think they're going to go unconventional here, boys. I do. But let's go ahead.
This is the quote, just in case part of what I transcribed there earlier in terms of that answer.
Yeah, Bobby, it was I just saw a lot of people respond after and just say, "Oh, it looks like we're going with a seasoned head coach." And I was like, I don't think that's what the answer was.
Yeah. Jeff, you're good to keep going with the super chats, you said?
Yeah, of course. I also wanted to get Cole's thoughts on George Warhop's chances of returning after that quote today. Wow.
Man, that guy's going to end up in the CFL. But
he has tire tracks on him after that.
I do want to, and like that's what I was getting at in our opening, like the honesty. And, I get at the end of the day, I'm just a fan, and maybe my opinion doesn't mean a whole lot to these guys in these high positions, but I just felt vindicated. Like I felt vindicated that, I got so pissed off after Harbaugh sat there and was like, I thought the O-line played good. And I was like I get that I'm not an NFL level coach, but like I can watch tape and see them, playing very poorly. So it was vindicating, very vindicating.
Jordan Warhol,
let's not bring him back.
No, real quick, Bobby. I think not the frustration, but the thing with we miss out when Bisciotti talks so infrequently. Like he's so good and he's so comfortable. He provides material for months upon months that we kind of
funny as shit too. Like he's genuinely funny.
But it is one of the things is every time he talks, he gets himself into trouble. And I think that's where he just basically said, you know what? Why bother? Like there's the one time he was talking about the Haloti Ngata trade, if I'm not mistaken, when they traded the Lions, and he said, who knows? Like, maybe we'll re-sign him. He has 1 year left on his deal or so. Well, he got hit with tampering charges, and he had to pay a fine for that comment. And then there was the Deshaun Watson comment. Like, I don't know if he's the guy that deserves a fully guaranteed deal. He got caught nonstop shit for that comment. And then there was the time where he said he almost fired John Harbaugh, and I think that comment provided a real challenge to a relationship. They recovered just fine, but there was a real edge to that relationship after Steve announced that he almost fired his head coach. And I mean, he's great. I mean, like, he's so upfront, and like, I got messages from colleagues like responding to me from other people at the Athletic, and they're like, I cannot get over some of the things he's saying, because you just don't hear that kind of transparency and that honesty very often. So that's what we miss out on when he talks so infrequently.
No doubt. And one of the things that, Cole, you were just kind of alluding to here with this blunt assessment, Jeff, you heard it. It began with Eric kind of giving an accountable, looking inward, right, introspectively, to use Steve's word, about the overall team and the scouting department and the coaching staff and his department and the front office and blah, blah, blah. And then unprompted, the camera pans over to Steve and he just says, hey, I want in on this. And he says, I think the coaches have a lot of that too.
Yeah.
And he says, I think you can look at it. A lot of our guys on our team that we expected to take the next step that did not take that next step. And we've got to get to the bottom of that with coaching and scouting. And you're kind of sitting there like, oh, he didn't have to do that. Nobody asked him directly, Jeff.
Yeah, and he said at one point, the offensive linemen didn't improve, which is a quote I don't think will be going on George Horvath's resume. Said that in October.
So anyway, that's just more takeaways as we rip through super chats. That was good. That was a good one from Richard. It inspired some conversation. Nick Clemens writes, Robert Saleh as head coach and Mike McDaniel as offensive coordinator would be crazy and would check a lot of boxes. Both are going to be coveted, at least in terms of their candidacy at the head coach level. Sammy writes, Tomlin is stepping away, which means the Steelers will retain his rights and leave open the possibility of a trade. Was there any consideration of doing something similar? I would have loved the trade. Jeff, I feel like you were asked this a week ago. You want anything on this?
Well, two things. One, the previous question, I think it was pretty interesting how Bisciotti made clear, look, we want to hear these guys' coaching staff suggestions. We're not mandated to offensive coach, defensive coach, because they're bringing an offensive coordinator with them, or they're going to hire a defensive coordinator. So I think that's important to remember. And you look at it like these guys are going to have to present an interesting case. Like the Ravens probably will have some staffing suggestions in some cases if the new coach needs them. But whoever gets this job is going to present an awfully compelling coaching staff. That's the key part of this. It's not just the head coach. It's who are you bringing with you and what's the sort of staff you're going to get. As for the trade, those situations can just get messy and hang on for a while. One, you got to do the trade with the team that John Harbaugh is interested in going to. You're not going to just trade him to a team he doesn't want to go to, because the new team is not going to, if John doesn't want to be there, the new team's not going to trade anything to get him. Two, John Harbaugh would have to agree to that. And why would he agree to it? Why would he want his new team, and the teams he's talking to are struggling teams, why would he want them to lose a good draft pick for him? Like, they need all that. So it's just those situations are really tough. I know it's happened before, but it really takes a situation where the head coach probably wants out. He knows exactly where he wants to go to, and he's ready to commit right away, and you could work someone out that way. None of those circumstance was in place with the whole John Harbaugh situation.
So, Jeff, I have a quick question for you. And I mean, I know you're not sitting in on the interviews, but just like, this is just kind of the fan in me that doesn't really know. So like when they come into these interviews and like you said, they're going to refer to what their vision for a coaching staff would be. Does that mean if like the hypothetical of Robert Saleh working with Mike McDaniel, a guy that he'd be connected to through the Shanahan coaching tree, like would Saleh have had communication with McDaniel to put that forward? Or okay,
yeah.
So
and there's no
working.
Yeah. And there's no absolutes, Cole. Like, you can't say I'm going to get in this guy because you don't know. Mike McDaniel could get a head coaching job.
That's it. That's kind of what I was wondering.
So you have to have multiple suggestions. These are the guys I'm interested in working with. I think I could get these guys. This is kind of what my staff looks like. These are some other options. I mean, nothing's absolute. You can't lay out the exact staff because there's so many moving pieces and the situation is so fluid at this time of year. So it's more getting ideas from them on what their staff would look like and who are some of the options that you feel like would be a good chance to join you.
I think the only guy that could do that is Clint Kubiak because he takes Rick Dennison and John Benton with him everywhere he goes. And Rick Dennison is who Gary Kubiak brought here back in 2014. I'm dying at that. Like, Rick Dennison being an older guy, he must just be like Gary's best friend. And he was like Uncle Rick growing up to Clinton Clay.
Rico, as they call him. Yeah.
That's too funny. I love it.
Couple super chats dumped in by DMV Nation. The first for 10. The second for 20. DMV, we see you, brother. Appreciate you for being with us tonight. Shawnee writes, Jeff, any idea about the college coaches Steve was referring to? Marcus Freeman is my dream scenario. There was just reporting, Jeff, within the last hour or so that he is a mid-interest staying at Notre Dame. And then, of course, just to piggyback off what Shawnee says and just a little bit of context here, there was one point where Steve made it clear that several college programs or college coaches or maybe representation of coaches reached out to the Ravens, not vice versa. Somewhat left the door open for it. You have any feel for who they might be?
No, but I mean, that's not really subject. Like, that's not the same interview process. Like, you don't request an interview with a college coach. So a lot of times those calls just are for background. Hey, this is what you're thinking. Would you be interested? And then it often goes beyond that or doesn't go beyond that. We talked last week on the show about, Bisciotti's fondness for Notre Dame. I would be really surprised if they didn't at least call Marcus Freeman and say, hey, would you be interested? But that doesn't really mean they've interviewed him. I mean, one of Bisciotti's good friends, Bisciotti has a good relationship with Dabo Sweeney from Clemson. And there's other guys that I'm sure they talked to or that called them to kind of express interest. That's pretty normal. They may interview 16 guys in the first stage of this, but they'll probably talk to over 100 just when they make calls for background, and they take calls from people interested, and then they take calls from people who might want to be on staff if the new coach. So there's a lot going around. I don't know exactly the college coaches they talk to, and there's a reason that doesn't get out because that would really hurt a college coach in recruiting. I mean, you can't come out that you're committed to these kids and then it come out that you're calling around trying to get out of there. But as Bisciotti noted, if you're in college right now, you're dealing with all that name, image, and likeness and all the recruiting stuff. And I'm sure you're probably trying to get to the NFL. So I'm guessing they've gotten plenty of calls from college coaches who are tired of that and looking for a new challenge.
The big question is, have they called Jordan yet about Bill Belichick's availability? That's what we got to get to the bottom of.
Or how about Signetti? What a personality he'd be.
Oh, man.
Baltimore. Yeah. JP writes, Jeff, what would you say in the press conference? What the vibe was like before and after in the room? Much love from San Angelo, Texas, part of the Ravens flock down south. What was your feel today at one winning drive?
First of all, I thought it was a productive press conference in terms of, I think what was needed to be asked was asked. I think Steve was, we haven't talked to him in a while now. When we talk about the dates that he last talked, it's more that he last talked in a press conference setting. Like, we typically maybe not in the last couple of years, but we'd always get him at the owners' meetings where he'd sit down a group of us. But that's kind of sitting outside in the sun and just talking to a group of 3 or 4 of us. A lot different than that. But I thought he was more forthcoming than I expected, and I always expect him to be forthcoming. I thought one kind of weird aspect of it was that room was filled. I don't know if you guys noticed or if any of the camera. That room was packed. Ozzie Newsome was in the front row, and George Kokinis and Nick Matteo. There was a few coaches in the room. Randy Brown, their special teams guy, was still in the room. You look back, and it seemed like the entire office was attending in that kind of news conference. And you don't usually see that in that type of news conference. You see that at retirement news conferences and contract extension news conferences. And I'm sure you'll see it at the new coach news conference, but you don't usually see it in an informational type news conference like that when we're talking about something that obviously was very unpleasant to have to do for the owner and the GM. So, but no, I think, look, he said so much. I kind of wrote 2 things already, and I think I have enough stuff left over to write 4 or 5 more stories. So I think we're all just kind of head was spinning. Okay, what are the most important things he said? Like, what is going to get the most attention? What does this mean? And, as usual, Steve, there's a lot to digest.
Boy, 60 plus minutes. Jack writes, and maybe you won't accept this because you don't like to be celebrated, but he says, congrats on the acknowledgement from Steve. You and Jameson getting singled out as 2 of the longest tenured writers in Baltimore at your respective publications. So Cole and I salute to you on that, Jeff. And Denaro says, I'll just keep going so you don't have to respond to that. Denaro writes, this is for you, Cole. First draft pick, 14 overall, offensive line or defensive line? They're going to go safety, just so you know.
Great question. Great. If they go safety, I might jump off the roof. O-line versus D-line, my answer will be the entire process. And I already know the Ravens will patch holes so that they can do it. They're going to go best player available. I do hope that within that formula, they do weigh need a little bit more this year than they have in the past, which is why we keep ending up with safeties. But it's going to completely depend on who's on the board. In terms of the best way to solve the offensive line, I personally would rather them sign a veteran at the guard position. I think if you sign a veteran and then you get another, 3rd, 4th round pick to come in and compete with Emory Jones, I think you'll be set up a lot better. So, kind of by default of that answer, I would probably lean towards D-line. But I mean, if they have a wide receiver sitting there, if for some reason Carnell Tate's there, I'm not going to say no to that. I don't think they're in a position in the wide receiver room to completely take that off their list, and it would kind of factor into that BPA position.
Denaro, thanks. Jeff, Collins putting you in a box. Flores or Minter?
I don't like Brian Flores. I don't like the fit. I don't like what you hear about him behind the scenes. I wouldn't even have him on my list. I mean, that's just personally. He's a hell of a defensive coach. But you talk about culture building, you talk about collaboration, you talk about communication, all things Steve Bisciotti swears by and advocates. I'm not sure where he fits in those things. Just one man's opinion. He's a hell of a coach. He's a hell of a defensive coach, though, no doubt.
Maybe, just maybe, ends up playing the Ravens twice a year in the division when it's all said and done. DMV Nation with a 20 spot. That's his 3rd so
Dude,
far
this guy's
tonight.
a man.
And no comments attached. So we're just going to give you love, DMV. We appreciate you. He's always here. He often does that across all the content channels too. Like, just throws in love. There's not always a comment attached, which says a lot about him. Compensatory Prick, one of my favorite channels out there. Cole, why don't you take this one?
The last time an offensive guy got poached, it was the dad of one of our candidates. Franchises have to be honest about the areas in which they suck. Use the head coach spot to solve your biggest problem. I saw a really good theory about this. And I mean, I've seen a lot of people say it's easier to replace a defensive coordinator than an offensive coordinator. And I think some people forget about how the Ravens have struggled with defensive coordinator in the past. They've just struggled more with, I think, quarterbacks before Lamar and Flacco, that I think we think all the offensive coordinators sucked. But do you guys remember Pops Madison? Like, people weren't very happy with him. People weren't very happy with Dean Pease. People weren't very happy with Zach Orr. So I it's not that I think one's easier to solve than the other. I do think that this is a valid point that, with the way the Ravens are built, I think even with the way the NFL is right now, if you go watch those wild card games on the weekend, there were obviously the defensive struggles with the Chargers Patriots game. But if you go watch the Bears Packers, it was one of those games, and we've seen it in the past with Mahomes, and sometimes it's who has the ball last, right? And so there's such a focus on the offensive side of the game in the last 5-6 years that I think there's a lot of value in having your offensive play caller. And Bisciotti talked about this pretty in depth. I thought that was one of the interesting tidbits about how he kind of talked about having, the offensive play caller as your head coach, and and there's that transition towards head coaches being the play caller, which is more of a recent trend. So I do see a lot of value in that. That's what gives me so much interest in Clint Kubiak. The fact that I know he's going to be here running his offense. There's going to continue to be continuity in the offense, but it's going to be the same thing no matter how you look at it. The offensive head coach is going to have to nail their DC, and the defensive head coach is going to have to nail their OC. You need a complete coaching staff. And one thing that you really need out of your defensive staff or your defensive unit is closing football games. The Bills have struggled mightily this year. They closed that football game with that pick in Jacksonville. So just one of those things that I would really focus on is if we are looking at defensive candidates, who are guys that are getting the best out of their unit with that regard, who closes games. I think you see that with Vance Joseph, for example. I wouldn't necessarily be my pick for head coach, but that unit closes games. So it's a great question.
You know who else closes games? A dynamic pass rusher. Let's find
so
that
you
guy,
want to trade
Cole.
for Max Crosby too? Okay.
Certain Vegas player. I think the way that I interpret this one from Zayad, Jeff, is do you see any kind of scenario playing out that Isaiah Likely is back?
You know what? I would think a market for him is not going to, it wouldn't, let me rephrase. I would think the market that he expects to have would not develop, would be the only way he's back. In other words, he's not having as much interest or getting as much money as he expects to get. But he had a tough season, but look how young he is. It's a young free agent, talented dude. I think he'll outprice himself out of the market. I do think it was interesting on multiple occasions they mentioned re-signing their own free agents. Like, who's left to re-sign that you're like, okay, they have to have. Okay, like, we could do a whole show on Tyler Linderbaum and that decision. But beyond him, like, you probably want to re-sign Jordan Stout, but he's a punter. Like, we're not talking about big bucks there. And, like, who else is there? Like, Falele? No, I'm kidding. But I wouldn't think they're, Draymond Jones was a great addition, but if you go and get that high impact edge rusher, I don't know that he comes back. Who's that?
Cheeto?
Yeah, but he's not expensive. Like
not a priority. But
yeah, like I'm just saying,
they don't. Zay Flowers, like Zay Flowers,
Yeah.
might be an extension guy. It could be Tyler, because I mean, if you were to do Tyler and Zay, you're looking at Tyler's probably an 18 to 20 mil per year guy, and then you're looking at Zay. Was he 25 to 30? Like, that's big. I know that year one cap hits will be cheaper, but that's a lot of money there. But that's really where my mind went was Zay and Tyler.
I think likely would be unlikely, but
I'd rather have Charlie Kolar, if I'm being honest with you guys.
This seems to be likely is one of Lamar's best friends on the team, and there seems to be a lot being said and done right now to make sure Lamar Jackson is happy, healthy, and moving forward as the face of this franchise. So that's why I would not completely rule likely out, even though it looks very unlikely on paper.
Okay. Bucket Bomber Win says, surprised Jim Leonard, Broncos assistant head coach / defensive pass game coordinator and former Wisconsin defensive coordinator / interim head coach, hasn't gotten a look yet. Always felt he should be back in the castle at some point. Jeff, any read on Sean Payton's assistant?
Don't be surprised if he's the defensive coordinator that some of these candidates they're talking to is pitching. We know how Ravens feel about former Ravens. He's viewed as a future coaching star. I don't know about a head coach. That seems to be a big jump, but don't be surprised if a couple of these candidates, I mean, look at you got some Denver guys that have interviewed. Don't be surprised if he's on their list to bring with them as a defensive coordinator or in some different role.
Had an NFL career, undrafted in 2005 out of Wisconsin. Just 43 years old. He'll turn 44 coming up next fall. Let's see. Rodrigo says, first time I'm able to listen to all of you. Great to get to know your insights beyond X posts. All the best to you guys and our Ravens from Chile. Rodrigo from Chile. Appreciate you, man. Whereabouts? My sister lived in Santiago for a little while. Zane with some Canadian currency, and that's got to go to only one guy and one guy only. Take it away.
It's got to pop up on my screen here. It's coming up on my. Who do you think ADC was talking about when he mentioned they were trying to get a superstar player at the trade deadline? That's probably a better question for Jay-Z. My first thought was one of the Miami Dolphins pass rushers because they were selling. So I thought Bradley Chubb, but Jay-Z, I don't know if you have more of a read on that.
They made an offer for Quinnen Williams. I think, is he a superstar? I would think he was. They were in on Quinnen, not at the level the Cowboys were. They made a call on a lot of star defensive players. They made a call on Jeffrey Simmons and, quite a few. I'm kind of zapped after a long day today. I remember for sure Simmons, and I know they were in with an offer on Quinnen Williams. So those were the two I'm guessing he was referring to, but I'm not positive.
Yeah. Thanks, Zane, and thanks to all of you that have dropped in super chats tonight. Super generous across the board. We do kind of got to clean up a few things here as it relates to just putting a bow on this conversation. And the Lamar topic, of course, was at hand several times throughout today's press conference as it relates to his role moving forward. We talked about the extension, right? Clearly, that's a priority. But priority number one right now, Jeff, as you know, as Eric noted, it's a 3-week draft process. Is essentially how he's handling this head coach search, heading it up. And, this 16, 15 candidate list right now is going to be ultimately shortened into second interviews and in-person interviews and everything that's to come. And then you bring in Steve for more of a hands-on process to, in his words, unearth the potential candidates and help them divvy it up, because ultimately we all know how he made his money in that regard. That brings us to 2 clips of his when it comes to the influence, the role that Lamar could very well play when it's all said and done in this process. Here's Steve from earlier this afternoon.
A lot to say, but he has no power. I have the power. They have opinions, and I want them all. I care about my players very much, but I can't give them power.
Jeff, this is getting all kinds of run in the social media sphere right there. Mob ties, boss-like, this, that, and the other. Your thoughts on how he handled one of many questions related to Lamar and kind of putting the ball in his court in a way, which we'll get. You know what? Let me go throw to that right now, and then we'll all react to both of these comments combined after this.
Eric made it clear to Lamar that when we get down here talking to him, I think he's texting Lamar after every interview, whether it's Zoom or in person. And I think he's getting some opinions from Lamar. I said to Lamar last night, when they call me up from Florida, you better get your ass up here too. Because if you want to do the interviewing, these are going to be full-day meetings like they were 18 years ago. And they go from department to department to department, right? So I said to Lamar, you can jump on my plane or find another way to get up there. But if you're that interested, then we're going to get a schedule. He's going to call me up. He's going to offer you the same luxury. And I said, I hope you take it. And he said, yes, sir. I think I will. So we'll find out.
All right, Jeff, what's your interpretation? I mean, is this a call to action essentially?
Say that again, Bobby. You cut out. Did you say, is this a call to action?
Do you gauge that as a call to action in terms of maybe their desire to increase his involvement?
I always have to be careful what I say about the Lamar relationship dynamic because it gets cut up into pieces on Twitter, and then I all of a sudden get labeled a lot of bad things. But I think, look, we've read the stories. We've all heard the speculation that Lamar's future was going to be a huge story this offseason around the league. People have written, could he be available in trades? What happens with the contract? And I took what Steve said today. Well, first of all, I don't think Steve's a big message sender. I think he's a pretty honest guy. But I took what he said today as he wanted everybody to know, we're moving forward with this guy as the face of our franchise. He's going to have a huge impact what we do going forward. We want him involved. We need him to be in accord with all of us decision makers. We want a window with Lamar Jackson at his best to make a run at winning Super Bowls. We wanted to send that message loud and clear that they want him a part of this. They view him as being a part of this. And I think if nothing else, turns down the temperature a little bit about all these storylines about, is Lamar happy there? Could they trade him this offseason if they get 3 number 1 picks? What's the future of his contract? He put it all on the table. This is exactly what we wanted to do. He wanted to send that message to fans, and he wanted to send that message to Lamar. This is how we feel about you. This is how important you are to our franchise. And that's kind of how I took it. Look, we're all in on this guy. Nothing that happened this past year where he struggled with injuries and there was all sorts of speculation. Nothing has altered our decision that we believe this is the face of our franchise who's going to get us to Super Bowls. And he put it all out there. I think it was a great move. There's no dancing around the bush and worrying about how his words perceived. I think it was a great step forward. And let's hope they're as transparent with this stuff going forward. And because they've made their thoughts pretty clear today that they're moving forward, and every idea of their future includes Lamar Jackson as their quarterback. And I think it was important to turn down the temperature a little and silence some of that noise that had sort of crept in over the last couple months of the season.
Yeah, I think sometimes send a message almost sounds like it's almost reprimanding, because I didn't take it that way. I thought the way Steve Bisciotti approached it was, he started with it plain language. I want him to be my quarterback. It was very, very specific, and this is what happens with franchise quarterbacks. And he just kind of detailed, I thought, very clearly throughout kind of what the plan is this offseason. It's Lamar Jackson is going to be a part of the head coach search, and then we're going to extend Lamar Jackson. And I think you have the quote too, Bobby. Like, his quote around the extension was one of the key takeaways for me from this entire press conference, because he basically just said, and this is what happens with franchise quarterbacks. It's the next guy becomes the highest paid until the next guy gets paid. And he basically said, like, let's just do that again. Let's take the contract that we had last time and let's add the money to it that would make Lamar the highest paid guy over whoever just got paid most recently. And, let's get it done. And it made it sound very, very simple from Bisciotti's perspective in terms of how this could be done. And I like that it put a timeline on it. They made it very clear that they want it done before free agency because of the cap relief that it will give the team. And if not, they have a plan in place anyway. So I just like that it was very clear. We don't have to go through, I don't think we won't have to go through the 2022 speculation about, where's Lamar going to play? He's going to be a Baltimore Raven. They made that clear. It's just about going through the logistics of putting things in place to get this contract done.
JP writes, going to call me corny, LOL. But I asked ChatGPT and Gemini for a history of head coaches with offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator backgrounds. And offensive coordinators have had more success tenure-wise versus defensive coordinators, showing them being one and done. What do y'all think? There's no question over the last decade or so, there's numbers out there to show that the offensive play callers at the head coach position, there has been a wave that's led to success. Like, there is a correlation and concrete evidence, guys, over the last decade, Jeff.
Yeah, my buddy Marco. Yeah, I don't know if you guys know him. We always feud on Twitter, and he's been on me for 3 years about this, maybe longer. And I do agree. If I had a choice, I'd probably go offensive, but I wouldn't disqualify a defensive coach if you view them as the best coach. Look at the AFC right now. Do you think the Texans are upset that they hired D'Amico Ryans? Do you think the Patriots are upset that they hired Mike Vrabel? Do you think the Bills are upset with Sean McDermott? Like, 3 of the 4 coaches still in the AFC are defensive coaches. And so I think you have to find the right coach. You have to find the right fit. I think if all things were equal, though, I would go an offensive coach if you're really comfortable with that guy, because I think the relationship between Lamar and the head coach and that dynamic with the play calling will be the biggest factor to the Ravens' success in 2026. However, I'm not going to turn down a stud defensive coach if they have a really good offensive coordinator that's coming with them. And you guys seem to like Robert Saleh, and if he brings Mike McDaniel, excuse me, and that dynamic. So I think you have to be open-minded, but I think if all things were equal, yeah, you can find that.
Did we lose him?
It's always around the hour 5 mark.
He's frozen. You with us?
There.
Yeah, you didn't. Guys didn't hear me finish that.
Just the final thought. Go ahead. Yeah,
no, I just said if you could find that an young offensive play caller and head coach to grow with the quarterback, that would be a coup.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, look, I mean, like we've already kind of said, we could go on and on and on. These guys went over 60 minutes to begin with. But ultimately, this is a search process that we now know is 15 or 16 candidates deep. We know that 8 have been confirmed to have been conducted interviews. And we know that it's just getting started over a 3-week timetable, if you will. And if that candidate ends up advancing into the postseason, assuming it's on a staff of one of these teams that's advancing, obviously this thing's going to continue to be drawn out, just as it was a few years ago when they were searching for Greg Roman's replacement. So great stuff tonight. Jeff, congratulations on everything from today at that press conference. All of your work can be found, of course, at The Athletic. Cole, I'm sure you're going to be turning around content in the coming days at Road Graders, as always. And I got some YouTube channel content out there as well across platforms. So any other final words before we get on out of here from either one of you guys?
Cole needs to behave himself. Let's just get that out. He needs to kind of calm down. Distractions during the day are distracting to me. So let's get that out. Let's get out there. There's no more feuding. Too much feuding in the media here. These guys are my friends.
Wait, Cole, hold on a second. We missed one super chat on this.
He's going to be so angry at me, Bobby.
Look
at
listen. Hold on a second. We got people in my Discord server that are slighted that some of these weren't read. So we got to
get them all out there. We might as
now
well.
That Jeff has broached the topic. Yes. All right. Jabbo says, thanks for destroying Jerry, Cole. Colin writes, Cole versus Jerry, 18 rounds. And Jeff as a special guest referee. Flores versus Minter. Who you taking? Okay. Let's see here. Hold on now. Let's just make sure we're being thorough. And Zayad who had to go this way. He says, F Jerry, like an all-pro Jeff Zaribek. Congrats. And to Jeff's point, there are friendship dynamics in play here. Thanks, Cole.
I know.
Listen here, folks. I'm going to make this very simple. I grew up playing hockey in Canada. I don't start fights, but I will finish them. You take a swipe at me, I'll take a swipe back. It's that simple. That's the way we handle it. And I mean, the nice thing is, I'm not a real professional. I'm just a fan. I don't really have to worry about this. Jeff does.
Yeah, sure.
Jeff, did this inhibit your ability to finish your piece today?
Yes, it did, actually, Bobby. I was getting all these texts. Like, I'm sure you're glad in the middle of this. I was like, middle of what? I didn't even know what was talking. Like, at some point, you can't have Twitter up on your screen. You actually have to work and write. So I had lost track of what people were tweeting. I didn't see any of these tweets where I got right in the middle of it for somehow. But
just to put it out there, though, I didn't have to bring anybody into my fight. I just throw my own jabs. Just so if we want to look at who's winning and losing, whoever's keeping score.
I'm dead. I so badly want to use the screen share feature right now to go through the mentions, but we got to go. King Lee writes, great show. My first time watching. Great job, guys. King, great to have you with us, brother. And thanks to Sleeper. Thanks to everybody for coming in hot tonight. I mean, we were well over 1,200 concurrents. Obviously, a week ago stands alone, given that, Harbaugh had just been dismissed hours before we went live. So thank you for your continued support of our channel, your interest in it. It's only getting started as this search continues to materialize. Jeff, thank you. Cole, thank you. Appreciate you guys. Like the video if you could on the way out. Subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell. We will be back on Tuesday, a week from tonight. And who knows? You never know. Maybe we'll have an actual head coach search that's even more crystallized than it is right now. Thanks, fellas. We'll catch up with you guys next week. Have a fantastic evening.